Welcome to episode 64 of our Road to Unicum. Today we review the T-100 LT. This is the tier 10 Russian light tank, and we're going to look at a couple battles on Prokhorovka and how to spot hill. And the reason why I'm going to show how to do that is I got on my last video, episode 63, on the WZ-132-1, that's the Chinese tier 10 light tank. I got some really good feedback from Quantum Gravy over on Reddit. And so one, he says, he disagrees with playing West in a light tank on Prokhorovka, which I agree with, and I'll talk about a little bit more. And then the second thing is that, he was saying that with the video, I might have given people the mistaken impression that the 132-1 is actually a good tank, and I think it definitely has its technical issues, which Quantum Gravy breaks down very fairly here. I found that the tier 10 Chinese light tank was much better than the tier 9, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the tier 10 is actually a good tank, because it's not. And if you look at things like the global win rates, it's definitely an underperformer. The tier 10 light tanks as a whole suffer from three issues. They all have very poor accuracy, they have long reload times, so low DPM, and they have abnormally high penetration drop-off for their AP and APCR rounds over distance. And you can see the drop-off rates by mousing over the ammo in the garage, and you'll see the tooltip, and it'll show you at various hundreds of meters of ranges what the penetration is, and you can compare it, for example, between your tier 10 light tanks and your tier 9s, and you'll see that it's obviously the drop-off is much steeper for the tier 10 light tanks. And there's a lot of reasons behind this. I basically am very strongly of the opinion, not just me, lots of people, that there are particular individuals who are responsible for balancing over wargaming, who are heavily biased toward overbuffing heavies and making light tanks fairly weak. Now, that isn't to say that the T-100 LT is weak. It's number 11 for global win rate for tier 10 tanks at like 51.5%. That's pretty healthy, and there's several reasons why. One is that it has an incredibly low profile. This is a little pancake of a tank, and it has very high camo values, and even when you get hit, the armor profile is actually pretty solid. You can bounce some shells from your frontal hull and then from your turret. Now, granted, you won't bounce most tier 10 guns. That's simply not going to happen. But again, some of the weaker penetration guns, especially when you're facing tier 8 and tier 9 opposition, light tanks and medium tanks, you can bounce some shells from them, and that's really problematic for those guys. Now, notice what I came up to hill. The first thing that I did is go all the way up towards F0 so that I can peek and see what tanks they have deploying toward the east side of the map. So we spotted and froze the E-100, who's stopped in no man's land, which he should not do. He should push toward the hill so that he's already safe and can't get shot at from multiple directions. But the thing that I did is, I took one shot on the bat chat early, and I'm going to take another one right there, but it's because I have the first shot advantage. In both cases, when I fired on the bat chat, 25T, I wasn't spotted. But as soon as I fired, I needed to back up. And then as I back up, below the ridge of the hill, this is a fairly flat tank. Taller tanks will have more trouble doing this. If you get spotted, you can get shot at, but this tank is small enough that when I back away from the ridge, it's hard for anyone on the map to hit me aside from Artie. Like, if they have tanks that are shooting from the middle of the map around F5, F6, they're going to see very little of me, maybe just a sliver of the turret. Now, one thing that I am doing, you notice when I'm making my rounds here to spot the zero lane, I'm doing inside out. I'm going clockwise. There was someone who had posted an earlier video who said that they think that it's better to go counterclockwise. So to start from the edge of the map and then do a counterclockwise circle to spot. I don't necessarily know that it makes a lot of difference. I feel more comfortable going this way. So I feel like if I get spotted going in the counterclockwise direction, as I'm finishing the loop, I'm going to be more susceptible to fire from mid. I don't know. Regardless, that's just how I feel. Maybe it's better to do it the other way. I'd be curious to hear your guys' feedback on this. I did just get splashed by Artie. It's inevitable. One thing that you'll notice is that every time I go over and spot the F0 area, and if I get counter spotted, I keep moving, and I keep moving for a period of time that is roughly the same as how long the tanks that I spotted were lit. That's the general way. It's not always totally correct. I think sometimes it's uneven, how long you stay lit. And by the way, I'm going to get away from this 50B as quickly as possible. You see, I already just fired on him. You want to stay the heck away from large heavies. Heavies have horrible camo and are easily spotted by anything, especially if it's sitting in a bush. And it's just like, I spotted this AMX heavy tank that's sitting in A0, which is a totally useless position for him to be at. But, you know, once I fire my gun on him, I'm just waiting, by the way, until he presents the side of his armor there, just waiting 2 seconds so I get a better shot, and I get spotted. Now, the 704 is directly to my west, so I'm going to keep the shack between us. I'm still moving back and forth, and like I said, the reason why you want to move back and forth is in case there's somebody you don't see who's aiming at you, to kind of potentially make them miss. And then also for arty, you don't want to give them a clear idea of where you are. Like a lot of light tank drivers, this always puzzles me when I see this. They'll get spotted, they'll get shot at, they'll drive away for like 5-6 seconds, and then they'll stop in a bush while they're still lit, and you know the other team can still see them. That just makes absolutely no sense. Notice I kept that shack on my left while I was firing on that AMX heavy tank, and then that way it's physically impossible, because that shack, it's destructible hard cover, but while the shack is there, it's impossible for that 704 to have line of sight to shoot at me. Now I'm going to take a little bit of a conservative route. I didn't actually need to do this because our 50B and E75 are moving up along the east side of tracks, but I was going to circle here a little bit wide to get closer to the 704 by either going down through the ditch or pushing directly along the bush line right above the water. But in any case, it's totally unnecessary, because we've won the east side of the map so big that our E75 and 50B are just gonna, you know, they were pushing down, and we're close enough to the 704 that the 704's camo is not going to prevent it from being spotted. Now, notice I'm telling our arties and other tanks, you know, giving them a heads up, hey, I'm going to spot the, you know, A6 area, and I don't even need to peek like I just did. I peeked that way in case I could see any tanks. Like in this case, I spotted their T-49, who for some bizarre reason stopped out in the middle of the field, and then their E75 is AFK. I could have proxy spotted these arties just by running along the tracks about where I am. But if I had done that, then I wouldn't have spotted the T-49 and the E75. At any rate, you know, like this is one of these things, you'll see me make some mistakes in the next video, or as I'm spotting over railroad, I am overexposing myself. As it turns out, I'll tell you, like in this particular battle, obviously we're doing really well, and I have like 8,000 spotting damage already. I actually didn't get an ace tanker for this, and had I known that that was going to be the outcome, I would have been a little bit more aggressive in trying to, like, I would have gone over the rails to try to, you know, kill the arty instead of, you know, waiting for our team to shellac them. You know, to try to do things like kills and damage, of course, will boost your XP. But most of the time, like, I would say one thing that's really kind of key about my videos is I tend to be pretty methodical. I'm not a person who has like abnormally good hand-eye coordination, you know, and so I don't YOLO. I try to do things very methodically, because the times when I YOLO or do stupid things, or when I tend to die early, and you know, that's no fun waiting for the battle to end so you can play your tank again. And so, you know, I think for the most part, the way that I play my light tanks, it's all based on just rational thinking and game mechanics. And, you know, to the extent that I can explain these things to you, and you can see other good, you know, folks on YouTube posting videos explaining it, these are all techniques that can be leveraged by anyone. Now, you know, that prior battle, you know, keep in mind we did have a good deployment. If you're wondering what to do in Prokhorovka when there are 3 arties like there were the last battle, if I'm in a heavy tank, I go to the middle ridge. So from the south spawn, I would go to F5, F6, or from this side, I go to E5, E6, or if I'm on the north side, I would go over to F0 so I can play the hill, right? Like their E100, the last battle, stopped in no man's land at like E8 or D8, which you should never do. You got to run all the way up to the hill or stay back. If you run all the way up to the hill, then, you know, you'll be protected from arty, because you'll be on the downside of the slope, and you'll be able to play hull down and, you know, angle your armor, you know, against tanks that are firing you from mid, etc. Now I'm going to go back to hill. One slight advantage that you have from this side, or actually say meaningfully that this side is better in my opinion for hill, but right here I'm going to stop and see if I can spot any of their tanks that are going to cross over the J7 area, so you can get some early spots and early damage for your team. In this case, it doesn't look like anybody's coming, so our deployment in this game isn't as good as the previous team, and I will say that overall our team in this particular battle ends up blowing a very sizable lead and making a lot of mistakes. Now, notice as soon as I fire, I back down the hill, and it's just in case a tank got up here that was capable of spotting me. You know, you have to assume if you're close enough that when you fire, you're going to get spotted, and you're not sure where they are, you should assume that somebody's there, they're going to spot you. I know it sounds like common sense, but a lot of times I see people fire and just sit there, right? And you don't want to find out if you've been lit, you know, by getting shot at and taking damage, because there is that 3-second delay before Sixth Sense will trigger. Now, from this side, to some extent, it's a little easier to work for a lot of tanks, and so, you know, there's a lot of bushes here that I can work with. and it's easy for me to shoot those tanks and then back down the hill. Now I don't even have to back down the hill all that much because there's this ridge in front of me, and this tank is such a pancake that it can be hard to hit, even if you're spotted and tanks are firing at you from mid. Now I don't want to give you the wrong idea and tell you that you should just sit up here casually. I mean, if you're taking fire, you got to back down the hill so that the tanks at mid can't shoot you. But really just kind of got to pay attention. So so far, like there are heavy tanks that go up there, behind the bushes. They're totally visible. Where that Conqueror died, that bush is going to be absolutely no help to him. And then this Progetto is making a mistake where he's peeking up, but he's not behind soft cover. If he were to his left, which would be to my right, a little bit to the west, he could peek up to the bush, and at least that way he's less likely to get spotted by me, right? But people make these mistakes all the time. You want to leverage the hard cover and soft cover given to you. And notice I've never peeked up on this hill without being very solidly behind this row of bushes. There's no reason for me to move forward from this yet. And to some extent, I'm hoping we can thin out some of their tanks mid. I mean, the real danger for Hill and Prokhorovka is trying to push over the top of Hill before either one, what tanks they've got who are, hidden behind the various bushes, right? Because those tanks can fire on you once you get spotted. And then two, you need to thin out their tanks at mid a little bit because their tanks, like where their T-44 and M41 are, if I'm crossing the top of Hill, they can poke up and shoot at me, but still not be visible or susceptible to fire from our tanks. Like our 257 is a little bit too low on Hill. Now granted, I think I don't know if he said this yet, but I think he starts to complain about needing more spots. And to some degree, he is, I think, waiting to push south towards F6 based on when we spot stuff. Now, I am being fairly patient here, and you could definitely argue I'm being a little bit too patient. My gut feeling tells me there's probably something on top of Hill. We just haven't spotted it yet, right? And so I'm actually telling my team that I am going to spot Hill. Like, it doesn't seem like the Centurion AX is still here because there was I think one time when I fired when I wasn't spotted. Actually, I'm not sure. That'll come more clear later, but you kind of got to get a sense of like paying attention to when you've been lit. Like right there when I fired, I didn't get lit, which tells me there's a pretty good chance that Centurion AX is no longer in the spot where he was. Now, it's still possible there's something on Hill that for whatever reason didn't spot me, and you'll see this in a moment here. There's actually a T-49 in a bush on the hill, and I think maybe it's partly because my tank is so flat, it's not very tall, that he didn't spot me when I fired, and I haven't seen him. But at any rate, there's kind of like this fine balance you need to manage as far as when is the right time to push forward. Because the second I push south, I go forward through these bushes. If there's anything else that they have left on Hill, I'm going to get spotted. And there's the potential that there are going to be some snipers in locations like down near the tracks and a little bit to the southwest. And once I get spotted, like there we go, there's the T-49. He was pretty forward and on the edge, and that's why he and I didn't spot each other until I crossed the bush. But if there's anything that's either at mid or potentially in the southwest side of Hill, or like this guy poking over now, this M41 Bulldog, they can shoot me. Now that M41, again, he's poking up in the clear. He should be doing it through the bush so he can get the first shot advantage and not get spotted until he fired. But these are all very simple, easily correctable mistakes, right? And here I need to be careful because like you can tell like that Revelry, he's already looking in my direction. So I back up until the bush is solid before firing my gun, and then that way, I don't get spotted. But so far, like things are looking great for our team. We haven't lost the western or middle side of the map, but we're in the process of winning the southeast side of the map. So that at a very near point, we're going to have control of roughly 3/4 of the map. But what you're going to see is some very poor positioning mistakes by our team, and I'm going to spot unwisely or be too casual with my hit points, which is always a mistake, especially in an upper tier game where you're talking about their tanks that are running around with like 750 alpha or so. You got to be really careful. Now, the last game, you guys don't remember, like I was clicking on A6 before I even got near the railroad tracks to tell people to be ready. Now, if our RD were smart, see right there, I just ate a shot from the Yak Tiger, and that's like almost 700 damage. That's a massive amount of my hit points. Now, if our RD was smarter, he would kill the T-49. Right now, I'm already safe. Nothing will happen to me unless I peek up, and I'm certainly not going to do it since I know Yak Tiger had already hit me. Right, but this T-49 is this guy who's preventing us from going up and over the hill, because if the T-49 is dead, right, and this M4, if these guys are dead, then we can push up and over into these bushes. We can kill the Centurion AX and do so while not getting spotted. Now, granted, 2 of our guys do push up and over, which is a good thing for them to do. The problem now is they're lit, and so you can hear, like, they're taking damage. And so that Centurion just 8 damage. And the thing is, like, which is really kind of tough, is we have a big lead here. We have a 4 tank lead, and we've got map control, and I've still got over half of my hit points. So we just got to take out the Centurion AX. Now, there's a couple problems that it's going to happen. So one, it looks like our Sheridan just spotted. Their Sheridan spotted our ISU 152 and our T-30. Now, our Striv S1 is so far back in the map, he's completely irrelevant. Now, what our team should have done is you want to make sure to pinch your opponent from multiple directions. So what the Striv S1 should have done, and he's got fantastic camo, is gradually work his way through the bushes on the one line and periodically stop, so that if he's got binocs, that it can kick in and he can spot stuff. Right? But a couple of our tanks stopped just east of their cap. They're sitting in open ground, and their Sheridan is spotting for them. So those tanks are eating a lot of unnecessary damage, and our large 4 tank lead has been narrowed down to a 1 tank lead. Right? And then unfortunately that shot misses there. There's a couple things I should mention about the T-100. So aside from the fact that it's got low profile and really good camo and is fast and has meaningful armor, not great, but armor that's good enough to bounce some stuff, the tank has incredibly low dispersion on the move, meaning that as I'm driving, as I'm rotating my hull, as I'm rotating my turret, the aiming reticle does not bloom that much. It doesn't get that much bigger. And this is, it's unusually low in this tank, to the point where even if you're driving at full speed and firing, the gun handling isn't that much worse than if you're sitting stationary. Of course, if you're sitting stationary, you'll be able to aim your shots in, and the reticle won't be quite as big, but it makes this tank very effective for running and gunning. By the way, that Yag Tiger should have totally not pushed up. He's alive. He's lucky he's still alive, because he's totally exposing his side to our tanks that are in mid. Now, there's a few problems that we have here. One is that our 152 pushed up way too close, right? And so he's sitting in a ditch where if he pokes out of the ditch, he's going to get spotted before he can even use his gun. Our S1 is now in a position where he's redundant with our 257, which is a mistake. One of those guys really should have gone down to the 1 line. And the problem that we have here is, if you're wondering why I don't just YOLO run forward, I have to cross open ground to get over and past each one of these ridges. Every time I do that, I'm going to get spotted, right? Which means they're going to be firing at me. And so this is kind of an unfortunate situation. It's possible that if I just YOLO'd over this ridge, even though I get spotted, maybe they miss me and I survive and then we win. But I'm not getting any help from our team here. Like, our 257 died very predictably because he was in the center of the map where there's really very little protection for him. And what I'm going to do is work my way a little bit south here so that I can poke up behind these bushes. But if it sounds like I'm blaming my team, like, we all make mistakes in this game. I got shot by the Yag Tiger because I poked up a little bit over the railroad, hoping to get some spots and some tanks. You'll see me make some mistakes later, but my team just fundamentally misplays this. And our 430 that's sitting east of their cap, and then our AMX, like, we only need one of them there. Really, the 430, who's pretty mobile, should probably be moving along the railroad tracks and flex over to the place where I'm clicking, right? Is to go on a wide counterclockwise loop. That would be the smart thing, right? But as it is, our tanks are sitting in positions that are very low value. I'm not going to be able to spot them without putting myself at significant risk. And because we had no one watching the 1 line, like, I'd been hoping the Striv would go there, and because he's got ninja camo, right? And if he had been there, he would have spotted the Progetto moving up there a mile away. He would have gotten the first shot advantage, or already would have been able to fire on the Progetto. This game may have turned out very differently. But it's amazing to me, just this game is very much a decision engine. At a given point in time, you need to look at the relative deployments of tanks on each side and the vision control on maps like this and determine where to go. And so, people are now saying you got to spot the 1 line. Yes, of course I do, because none of you guys were in a position where you would have spotted the Progetto, which would have been enormously helpful, right? And so, I've got the Progetto lit here, and keep in mind, I am close enough now that as soon as I fire, I'm going to get spotted. So actually, I got a really high roll. Was that 400 damage? That can't be right. Huh. Oh no! That was my spawning damage, and then unfortunately that shot misses, which is super unfortunate because he would be dead with that shot that just hit him had my prior shot hit him, and then he had APCR loaded, so I ended up eating 3 shots. I probably should have only eaten 2 shots or 1, but I missed 2 shots in there, which was enormously unhelpful for me preserving my hit points. So now between those 3 shells that I ate from the Progetto as well as the shell that I ate from the Yak Tiger earlier, I'm one-shottable, and so any kind of flexibility or rushing that I could potentially do is kind of thrown out the window, and I just need to hope that I can spot something so that we can kill it. Now the problem where the Striv is that if there's something down along the 1 line, right, like where the E4 is, the Striv probably doesn't have a shot. And so our team just totally misplayed from the middle to the back half of that match. We blew away a very, very large lead. So I did get an ace tanker badge, which was, it's like one of those weird things where I feel like I performed reasonably well individually, made some mistakes toward the end that certainly hurt us, and then like I said, our team just wasn't applying map control correctly. So we'll be looking at other tanks, but definitely post your constructive feedback. I'd like to hear it. It's useful to have dialogue with you guys about it. Hope you enjoyed the video. Take care.